Okay, so today is the birthday of this very important Dutch architect who is considered, at least by some, the father of modern architecture in the Netherlands. But he was actually a transitional figure between what we call tradition and what we call modernity. Born in 1856 on this day of August, and died in 1934. In a country with great architects and great artists, Berlage stands as an important figure, and you know, there was, I imagine that it still exists, an important educational institution in the Netherlands, the Berlage Institute. We had two friends, well, they are now actually in Singapore, but for a good number of years they were in Indonesia, because one of them is Indonesian, and they both studied at the Berlage Institute in Rotterdam. Okay, so he was a proeminent Dutch architect. But what I see here agitates me, because I see different dates. I don't understand. I have to double check. It might be that he died actually, and not on the 15th of August, but on the 12th of August. At least this is what I see written here. But I have several sources for my information, and the one I used said, I'm confused, forgive me. Anyway, we'll talk about Berlage today. So Berlage studied architecture at the Zurich Institute of Technology between 1875 and 1878, after which he traveled extensively for 3 years through Europe. In the 1880s, he formed a partnership with the Netherlands, with Theodore Sanders, which produced a mixture of practical and utopian projects. A published author, Berlage had memberships in various architectural societies, including SIAM, le Congrès International d'Architecture Moderne, the first one. Considered the father of modern architecture in the Netherlands and the intermediary between the traditionalists and the modernists, Berlage's theories inspired most Dutch architectural groups of the 1920s, including the Traditionalists, the Amsterdam School, the Stijl, and the New Objectivists. He received a British RIBA Royal Gold Medal in 1932. This is remarkable, to have an influence on such divergent groups like the Amsterdam School and the Stijl, the Traditionalists and the New Objectivists. This shows the complexity of the man and the complexity of his works. What you see on the right is maybe his best known work, the Stock Exchange in Amsterdam, quite a remarkable building. But he built several quite remarkable buildings. And he does look like a serious, almost introspective man in this old picture. Very interiorized, I would say. I wish more architects look like this these days, instead of the happy-go-lucky faces that we see everywhere, following the fashion coming from the United States, where you have to show a happy face. Anyway, because that's how it is in the States. You know, you ask someone, how are you? And that someone says, great. My mother died yesterday. Well, how could you feel great? But they are taught not to tell about their sufferings, and it's in the culture. But you can tell, looking at the picture with Berlage, that in my opinion, he was a dreamer, and an introspective nature. Some drawings by Hendrik Petrus Berlage. So he was born mid-century in the 19th century. So, you know, his manner of drawing was, you know, still belonged to the 19th century schooling and so on. But it's still, I think we can appreciate, you know, the complexity and the rigor and the sensitivity of the drawings. You'll also see some works done freehand, even in a few in Indonesia, because at one point he was asked by the government, the Dutch government, to go there and, you know, record, you know, the architecture, maybe even ways of life in the Dutch colonies. I think also he was influenced by that trip, or maybe other trips as well, because there are certain aspects of exoticism in his work, which probably come from the influence of upon him of impressions that he got in various in his various trips. Because I think, you know, you have the colonists and you have the colonized, but the influence is not only from the colonists on the colonized, but also the other way around. So it works both ways. And I think it's good that it works both ways. What is not good is to have colonies and colonisms and colonists. That's not good. Anyway, certain things are getting better, and we can appreciate them as such. So these are drawings by Hendrik Petrus Berlage. This building was built, and we are going to see it. And now we see a few handmade drawings, hand-drawn, with a really an energetic and I would say lyrical hand. I think it's a very fine drawing, and it shows the drama of the tree, and I can feel it. Now I know he was Dutch, but I almost see something of Vincent van Gogh here. And you know, they were contemporaries. I think Van Gogh was born in 1850s or so. So yeah, perhaps it could be an interesting subject for research, so to speak. You know, to think of Vincent van Gogh and think of Hendrik Petrus Berlage and compare them, the handmade drawings and so on, an architect and an artist. These are drawings he did in the Dutch colonies in Southeast Asia, and I think they are done very well. You know, they show you know, a certain lyricism, and also the drawing is well built, well constructed. This one
it's
as
Borobudur
well.
Temple.
Pardon?
Borobudur Temple.
This is the Borobudur Temple?
Yes.
Yeah.
The color should be gray. Yeah, it's written in the bottom
yes,
right.
yes, I see now. I didn't look at the lower right corner. Yes. But otherwise, you know, I know the Borobudur Temple, but the way he drew it here, it didn't make me think of it. This is also in Indonesia, no?
Yes, in North Sumatra.
Very nice buildings. You really have great architecture there, Echo.
Yes, vernacular architecture.
Yes, yes, yes. So this is another drawing by Hendrik Petrus Berlage, and another one. What's written here? Batavia.
Batavia is the capital city.
You are from there?
This is the capital city. I'm from Bandung.
Okay. So this is the,
from.
So this is the capital city of Indonesia.
Jakarta. Yeah.
Well, I don't see Jakarta there. I see a different word.
Batavia.
Yes. So it's not, is it Jakarta?
Yes, it's Jakarta, yeah. The former name is Batavia.
I see,
That's
I
name.
see. I see, thank you. So this is the former name. Anyway, another good drawing, I think, by Petrus Berlage, no doubt. Okay, he was influenced by the architecture of H.H. Richardson, one of the three, fathers of modern architecture in the United States, the famous triad, H.H. Richardson, Louis Sullivan, and Frank Lloyd Wright. But it seems Hendrik Petrus Berlage was influenced by H.H. Richardson. And I show a few works by H.H. Richardson. This is a church in Boston. He worked extensively with masonry walls with a certain massivity. On his turn, H.H. Richardson was influenced by the Romanesque architecture. And not too many people were influenced by the Romanesque architecture, most by Renaissance architecture, some maybe by the Gothic architecture, but not so many by the Romanesque architecture, but H.H. Richardson was. And this was the man, a very, I would say, impressive, man. Unfortunately, he died young, but he built a lot. H.H. Richardson was immensely prolific. He could have lived 40 years more because he died at 40 something. He could have lived, twice as many years, but he already built a very large body of work. A very interesting man, I would say. A good architect. So H.H. Richardson had an influence on Hendrik Petrus Berlage. Again, this is H.H. Richardson in the United States. And now we'll go to the works by Berlage. This is a Villa Henny in Haag, or Hague. Look at that ceiling, it's splendid. It respects a traditional way of building, but also it has a vivacity which makes it appealing even to those with a modern state of mind, so to speak. Towards the exterior, this is how the building looks like now. What can we say? But it's still not a passé building. And it was built, more than 130 years ago. Could we say that, that there was a certain level of eclecticism in his work? Probably yes, but this was very normal for the second half of the 19th century, or towards the end of the 19th century. But you'll also see some, almost resolutely modern architectural gestures from him, surprisingly so, actually, in my opinion. Anyway, an interesting building by an interesting architect. And now we go to another villa, Villa Heymans. A lot of brick, just like in the case of H.H. Richardson. But his architecture is different from the one practiced by the North American architect. Still, there was the Dutch with a continuous thirst for learning, the curiosity. They often looked towards the United States for a source of inspiration. Frank Lloyd Wright later had a lot of impact on the Dutch architecture. And yet the Dutch absorbed the influences and and transform them creatively. So these are early works by Hendrik Petrus Berlage. A church, the first Church of Christ Scientist. Well, you know, I don't know about that, the Christ Scientist, but that is not his problem. You know, there is such a denomination. To me, it sounds a little bit strange, the Christ Scientist. Strangely, there is no first Church of Christ Artist. The building is beginning to be more and more modern, you know, garner certain so-called details. And you will see when the, you know, the horizontal, the band window that became a flagship manifestation of modernity in the 20s or so, of the 20th century. It's an interesting building, considering that it was done earlier than 1920s, and already you can tell this is an architect moving courageously towards modernity. I mean, even the movement of the various parts of the building show a quest for freedom. So this is the Church of Christ the Scientist, the first Church of Christ the Scientist by Hendrik Petrus Berlage. Again, great brickwork. Not just the brickwork, look even at the tiles on the roof, impeccably employed. Everything woven, both the tiles and the bricks. Now this is, you know, new rendering of the building. The proximity of the water also adds a lot to the general impression of the building, and we'll see other examples, and not just in the case of Berlage, but other Dutch architects. They seem to like you know, picturesque architectural configurations. Okay, now Villa Simons, which later was named New Parkwick, from 1913, so more than 100 years ago in Hague. Very different from the previous building that we saw. Sorry about the resolution of the plans. A lodge, but this is a large building. You'll see 1916. Hubertus, who is I don't know what it is now. This building, Saint Hubertus, a very large building with a it's luxurious building with an impressive tower, perhaps too impressive. Perfectly symmetrical to infuriate Mr. Bruno Zevi. Well, Zevi came later on the scene, but still, Berlage, you are going to see a building that is, almost perfectly modern, so to speak. He also designed a lot of furniture. We are going to see at the end of the presentation some of the pieces of furniture designed by him. Maybe he designed this too. I don't know. He might incorporate it within the structure of the room. He was an architect through and through, so to speak, and it's obvious. But you can still see, the reluctance to leave tradition. No, he was still anchored in what we call the past. Maybe that's why he was melancholy in the picture we saw at the beginning. Maybe, he was attracted towards a future, those, intuition he had, but then he was also affectionately connected with what preceded him. But there are, because of these tensions, you see this entrance into the building is remarkable, is rich, is complex, is even sculptural. Now we arrive at a work which, in my opinion, is his most modern. It's a museum, and an important museum. I understood they have the largest collection of paintings by Piet Mondrian in this remarkable building and a remarkable museum. Yeah, already because of the terraced top part of the building, not in all parts, but well, if you look at the plan or the view from above, the building is not so resolutely modern. But if you look at from the level of the eye, at least from certain positions, the building does have a convincing modernity. The building is symmetrical, but you don't perceive that symmetry in most of the pictures that I showed. But you can see in the inside, I think says more about how the building looks like from the air than from the outside from certain points of view. It is described as an Art Deco building. I don't know. I mean, I understand why it is described in this way, but it could also be a little bit misleading. For a building, around 100 years old, this doesn't look at all not modern. Interesting what is going on here. When I discovered this picture, I couldn't believe my eyes. So what is going on here? And even here, this is almost like the column by Peter Eisenman in the Wexner Center. Really, it's amazing. What is this? And what is this? Could it be that he didn't do this? But these are very iconoclastic gestures. You can tell why the Stijl was influenced by him. It's enough to look at this part of this building to see that this is almost the Stijl. Theo van Doesburg probably would have loved this if he saw it, and I imagine he did see it. A surprising architect indeed, Hendrik Petrus Berlage. Now this glass top here was built afterwards, not by him. And we'll see also a picture of this courtyard without this more contemporary addition. So initially, I think this courtyard, the exterior was not covered by glass. This came later. You see that this is the courtyard that we just saw being covered with glass. Here there is no, so I imagine initially he did the building in this way, without that sculpture probably. And here is the building, you know. With the exception of what is here, the building is symmetrical. Now the Peace Palace, this was just a project, but an interesting project, and shows his skill in drawing and conceiving a building, maybe not as modernistic as we might have liked, or as the previous building might have suggested to us that he was capable of doing, but anyway, it was not built. It was supposed to be quite a large building. Projet pour le Palais de la Paix, a project for the Palace of Peace, avec entourage. A hotel in Hague, a hotel, you know, what can we say? A building in the Netherlands with brick, but has an interesting vertical space, like a courtyard or this atrium inside is good. And you'll see in another building also remarkable work done inside the building that you wouldn't actually expect looking at the building from the outside. And you see there, Bombay, Calcutta, there are references here to the dialogue, so to speak, between the Netherlands and Asia. The Amsterdam Commodities exchange is that, in my opinion, I mean, not just my opinion, it's known that this is, people think this is his most important work. A very large building with this truly remarkable, you know, space that is used for all kinds of events. And here you see, you know, steel structure, you see brickwork, you see arches, you see, they come together gloriously in this building. And yeah, imagine this building and this space, large space within the building. They are both very inviting for all kinds of events. And I think I'll have here some pictures about those. Yes, you can see anything can happen in this large space, theaters, conferences, gatherings of all kinds, exhibitions. It's a glorious public space within the, you know, the stock exchange building of Amsterdam, built by Hendrik Petrus Berlage. You know, I was thinking about what Alvar Aalto said, that architecture belongs to culture, not to civilization. And yesterday I discovered not a very dissimilar statement by Philip Johnson. Philip Johnson was never one of my preferred architects. I mean, in between Alvar Aalto and Philip Johnson, I would always choose Alvar Aalto, but they said and they thought in a similar way. So Alvar Aalto said architecture belongs to culture, not to civilization, while Philip Johnson said the future of architecture is culture. Interesting. Now the building even bears his own name there. You can see here a certain influence that came through from H. Richardson on Berlage. And even here. The original plan, or the sketch of the original plan, it was built a little bit differently from what we see here. This is the, you know, the actual plan of the building. So it's the stock exchange of Amsterdam, the stock exchange building of Amsterdam. Now, a very interesting building in London, he built the Holland House. Gone is the big brick, but still the weaving that he was good at in architecture continues here in a gray mode, so to speak. He truly designed maybe a very appropriate appropriate building for London. It is the Holland House, but it is within the city of Holland. We see here in the corner, in the upper corner, the building by Sir Norman Foster. So they are very close to each other. And I think the building by Berlage still has a lot to say. The interior maybe is a little bit, I don't know. In a way, too many things are happening here, for my taste at least. But the outside, I think, is very finely tuned for the context of the street of what London means. I mean, look at the elevation of the building. Don't, you know, it's not so important, but this the whole of the facade is remarkable. Let me see. Yeah, I have another picture. That's how it is. And if you build a building like this today, I'm sure it would stand out and it would be publicized everywhere. And this was built, I don't know how many years ago, but many, at least 70, 80 years ago. And even with the, curious details, so to speak, in the corner, I don't know if this was meant to be a fountain or something. I don't know, but it makes me think now if I'm to compare, from history, I'm thinking now of San Carlo alle Quattro Fontane by Borromini with sculptures, statues in the corner, in the four corners at the intersection. I don't know what he meant to do here, but it's interesting. So this picture was taken 4 years ago in 2017. The Holland House. The Holland House by Hendrik Petrus Berlage. And you are going to see also an interesting picture with the reflections of light and shadow. You see on I don't know where this came from like this, but it's almost surreal. I'm sure he didn't plan this. This came because of the whatever building is across the street. Anyway, a good building, and I would say, in good measure, modern by Berlage, the father of modern Dutch architecture. Although they have other fathers like Dudok, Berlage was not the only one. A Swiss hotel in Amsterdam, nothing impressive outside, and even maybe inside it was refurbished. It's probably an expensive hotel. It looks like it, but I mean, it looks like it if you look at what they did inside. Anyway, it's a hotel, so it belongs more to civilization than to culture, perhaps, meaning to commerce. I don't know if initially it had the same function. Maybe yes, maybe not. The insurance company, well, is a very good building. I couldn't find more information. I mean, I don't know Dutch, and it requires some effort to translate everything. But initially, I thought was some kind of a school or maybe a factory, but no, it's an insurance company. It's a good building. It's another good building by Hendrik Petrus Berlage. What I notice is, and what I like actually about this building and other buildings he did, that there is a negotiation between the vertical and the horizontal. The building is rather horizontal, but also there are insinuations of verticals here everywhere. So this could have been in a more orthodox modernity, plain horizontal window, and that's it. But he divides horizontality into vertical fragments. And I think this tension between the horizontal and the vertical identifies his transition from what we call the past or tradition towards what we call modernity. And it is seductive, I would say. And perhaps taking suggestions from his work in the present, we could maybe envision modernity less simplistic, not to say less banal. So this one. Because just like in a painting by Piet Mondrian, there is an interplay between the horizontal and the vertical. And that interplay creates a dynamic reality that unfortunately a lot of modern architecture moved away from. This is a city hall, and I would say in its austerity is impressive. Again, I don't know in what year it was built, but it has probably at least around 80 years. It's probably around 8 years old, but it is austere, and it is, I would say, remarkable. Great brickwork, you know. I mean, how did they do it here in the corner? Did they cut both bricks at 45 degrees? And no, what can we say? Great craftsmen. There are many books on him. This building will surprise you probably. The inside, not so much the outside, but it's 120 years old. Towards the outside, what can we say? It could be anything here, something institutional, but it has an inner. Look at this. The richness of this atrium is remarkable. Yes, it's historicist. I agree, but it does have aesthetical qualities beyond the style, so to speak. Now, being that it is 120 years old, ornamentation is still very much present, but I'm glad it is. A very rich interior, and yet rigorous, and even to an extent modern, because it has a clarity despite historicism. The exterior is, maybe more banal, but the interior is, I would say, very engaging. Okay, and now we end the presentation on Hendrik Petrus Berlage with some of his furniture designs, and he did work a lot in this field as well. Look at this chair. It's whimsical, it's interesting, it's, maybe it's not very comfortable, but it's ingenious. Another one, maybe more comfortable. Maybe less ingenious. Anyway, he experimented. He tried all kinds of things. And like other architects, he built a lot of chairs or sitting area, objects like this one, which obviously needs some kind of a soft material on the horizontal surface. This one is interesting, is it inspired by, who knows, Egyptian examples, or, but it's very well crafted and, quite a piece. It doesn't matter, you look at it from the front or from the side, it's still an interesting, very viable chair. A little throne, if I can call it so. Massive wood. It doesn't matter how much you love modernity, but looking backwards, there are values in what preceded us, and those values could make one nostalgic and inactive, or could make one nostalgic and furiously creative. If I can risk using the word furiously. Thank you, and I cannot say happy birthday, Berlage, because now I'm confused. It seems he's not actually associated with the day of today.